Hello again and welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Raymond Peterson.
And once again we're pre-taping, this time the Thursday before our Monday air date. And basically we'll try to touch base on things that are in the media, in the news, and things that should be in the news.
Yes.
And we might as well start right at the top of the show because it'll still be noised about come Monday, the farewells and goodbyes to the Bush 41, the 41st President of the United States of America. I don't want to just jump in there and start doing things in a negative format because he did some stuff. Let's talk about the positive side of his career before we try to set the scales right. Tell us, Bob, about some of the positive things George Bush 41 can be lionized for.
Well, I mean, when he was running during his campaign, of course, he talked about, he had the famous quote, "No new taxes, read my lips, no new taxes." But as his term wore on, he realized that the economy was going to take a hit. The federal government was going to take a hit if it didn't have new revenue streams. So he put political expediency aside, and for the good of the people, he raised taxes, which didn't go down good with the public, didn't go down good with Republicans, but he did what he thought was good for the nation, and that was that was part of his spirit, I guess.
Okay, so I can give him points on that.
Yeah.
I agree with Bob. I think there were some things that were truly in the interest of the nation. I think overall he was a benevolent president.
But no, let's not go too far.
Let's not go too far. Okay, I think he was. I think his personality as a human being was genuinely a kind and benevolent person. As a president, you can't rely on human characteristics when you're in a position like that, because your humanity really has nothing to do with a lot of things that go on in government.
Actually, no, I think Jimmy Carter was a human guy who tried to do exactly what was right by his humanity. However,
and where does he rank on the list of presidential greatness?
I'm not even going to say that because that's another discussion, but among the things that George Poppy Bush, President number 41, that I think is going to rank him as one of the better presidents as far as political acumen was the fact that even though Reagan started the rapprochement with the Soviet Union and what became Russia, when the Berlin Wall came down, there was a serious crisis in what was going to happen on the international stage.
Sure.
And he basically managed that with astuteness and real aplomb. One, you had the wall coming down, you had the Russians worried about Germany becoming reunited as a threat, and Germany becoming reunited and going into NATO, which they didn't want. And you had the French and the British and a bunch of other European nations who did not want to see a unified Germany because of historical reasons. And Bush was the guy who basically said, you know what? They already paid whatever they needed to pay, and the fact that these people in the East have been trying to batter that wall down for so long, and it's finally come down, we need to let them unify if that's what they want to do, and we need to let them decide where they want to be. And so he massaged Gorbachev, and he massaged the French and the English, and he got basically German reunification done in the best interest of not just Germany, but the globe. And that, for me, is a major geopolitical accomplishment. Sure. I really give him points for that. I give him points for being a bona fide patriotic guy who volunteered, became the youngest fighter pilot, if not just the youngest Navy fighter pilot, the youngest fighter pilot, I believe, in the U.S. forces during World War II, shot down, decorated. So there was no doubt about his patriotic bona fides.
But to just tag on what you said, I'm trying to remember who said it on air just the last couple of days. He said when the wall went down, when all that was going on, that was not the right time for a touchdown victory dance.
Yeah.
That was not the time to be shoving it down
Yeah.
somebody's throat and celebrating somebody else's demise.
And he did not.
It was a time for diplomacy, and other presidents would have acted differently. And even Reagan, Bush looks, very human compared to Reagan. So everything's relative.
Everything's
I'm not
relative.
laughing at you. I was just thinking of the way the
Everything
current
is
guy would
relative.
react to
Yeah.
something like
No,
that.
yeah,
When you
yeah,
check
yeah.
out.
Everything's
Yes.
relative.
Yes,
So-
we don't even have to talk about how 45, how this guy would react. He would be tweeting insults.
Oh, he'd be doing
Globally.
a jig in DuPont Plaza.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So yes, I really applaud some of the positive things that he did, and there are a couple. There are even more. But see, we come from the school of hard nose. Let's call it what it is. Let's look at the record and try to keep the record straight. And so, like we had the discussion about, here we are, the same guys who know all about the FBI's COINTELPRO and all the negative stuff that they've ever done in the course of the history of the FBI, having to come to bat and say, well, yes, certain instances the FBI actually do good work. It does good work. And so, but on the flip side of the coin, when they do bad things, you got to tell about it. So for me, it's interesting because when I started watching the television coverage and seeing the print coverage about how the mainstream media and basically the U.S. in general was treating the passage of Poppy Bush, I kept saying to myself, am I listening to the same historical archival stuff that did I live through a different period of history or what?
Right.
But then I started surfing, and there were a number of online sites and a number of stuff that started to put the record straight. And just this afternoon, before we came down here, our resource person, good friend Keith Gonzalez, sent me a link to a Truth Out site. And I got to tell you, these people in Truth Out, they were saying, no, we're tired of all this. He has a halo and he walks on water. And I got to read the headline, just to give you a sense of it, folk. I will not speak kindly of the dead, period. And then Bush was detestable. Whoa, that's kind of harsh. But this was an op-ed piece that ran on Truth Out. The author was Michael I. Neiman, and they published it on December 4th. But he had something like 7 things, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 things that he felt made this person detestable. Now, number 1 on his list was the Willie Horton campaign ad. Now, one of you guys want a brief summary of the Willie Horton campaign ad?
Sure. Willie Horton was a convicted felon who was furloughed. He was, and this is this takes place in Massachusetts during the presidential campaign between Mr. Bush and Michael Dukakis. Willie Horton, as I say, was a convicted felon. He was on what they call a furlough program. And while he was in this program, out of prison, he raped, and did he murder this woman as well?
I think it was rape, murder,
Rape, murder.
a multiple slew of crimes.
Right, committed these heinous crimes while he was out on parole. And Bush campaign made this the center of their argument against Dukakis, saying that he was not tough on crime,
Right.
which created the atmosphere that we're still living with today, that, you have to be tough on crime. Being tough on crime means convicting criminals, and who do you, in this country, I don't want to go on with who they might choose to convict, but being tough on crime, this is what set the tone.
Here's
Willie
the-
Horton thing.
Talk about how.
It was the lasting image of his face
There
on
you
the
go.
screen.
How it was done.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
about it.
No.
I mean,
Okay.
if you look it up on YouTube, it's easy enough. Just Google, go on
Is
YouTube.
it on you? It is on
Yes,
still
yeah,
on
yeah.
still
All
to
kinds
this
of
day.
filth.
Sure.
It's an infamous campaign.
Just Google Willie Horton a furlough or campaign ad.
Campaign ad. It'll
Not to
come
be
up.
confused with another famous Willie Horton. The
Willie
baseball-
Horton campaign
the
ad.
the
That's
baseball
all you gotta
player.
Google.
That's another person.
right.
But yeah, if you look at the ad, it's a brooding image of a black face brooding into the screen, and the background image is a revolving gate in a prison.
People coming out of prison.
Coming out and coming in, and that's the image they cast to the public. This
Yeah.
black,
And they
mean guy
blew it up, ran it for like
glowering at the screen.
30 days or so and such and such. But the key phrase here is the Willie Horton campaign ad blew a powerful dog whistle awaking white racism and fear. And that's basically what they wanted to trigger.
Right.
Fear of a black man, fear of black criminality, and by association, painting all black men and all blacks with the brush of crime,
Sure.
criminality,
Yep.
assault.
Well, look at the comments by the campaign organizers, campaign runners, actually. Here's a quote from Lee Atwater, his campaign strategist. Quote, "If I can make Willie Horton a household name, we'll win the election." And Roger Ailes, Mr. Ailes of Fox News fame, who was another campaign strategist, he said, the only question is, quote, "The only question is whether we depict Willie Horton with a knife in his hand or without it." Pretty powerful statements, and I think it's easy to see what they were going for.
We can cap this negativity with this interesting quote from Truth Out. Listen to this. Roger Stone, Roger Stone, who's now in the news with the Trump Russia probe, most recently of Trump fame, at the time warned Bush and Republican National Committee Chair Lee Atwater, who was responsible for launching this campaign, it's a racist ad, and quote, "You're going to regret it. You and George Bush will wear that to your grave." Atwater, before dying in 1991, apologized for the Willie Horton campaign ad.
He did.
Bush never did.
Right. No, he never did.
Now,
No.
that says it all as far as I'm concerned with negativity number one. We could go on and go into the thing. Invasion of Panama. That's number two on their list. For me, that's personal because that's where I was born, grew up on the Panama Canal Zone. Basically, Bush, barely in office, once he successfully got into office from the Willie Horton ad campaign, went after Manuel Noriega, the then dictator of Panama, because he needed to, quote, arrest him for doing drug deals with the drug cartels. Well, yeah, I know. Go ahead. You want to throw your line?
I was just going to say he was just getting out of hand. I mean, he was working along with the Bush administration all along, and he started to go rogue, as they say.
Right.
So they
Started
wanted to
to-
rein him in.
Started to go independent. I
Started to
guess.
go independent. Yeah.
But see, he was independent when they
Right.
When they
recruited him,
Right,
because
right,
guess
right.
what?
Yeah.
When Bush
Right.
was the same Bush was the head of the CIA, Noriega was one of his assets.
right.
And they knew back then that the guy already had close ties to drug runners and drug dealers, but they needed or wanted him as an asset, so they brought him into the fold. Well, you know, when they arrested him, quote, by invading Panama, and that's the phrase they used because they wanted to make it look like a big military invasion to get a criminal, at least 3,000 civilians were killed just to get this
Which
one
is a
guy.
large number,
okay?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
They say at least 3,000. Maybe as many as 3,000. I'm going to say if that's the number they're giving you, that's an undercount. I'll bet you the Panamanians can tell you a hell of a lot more people died.
Sure.
But
I'm sure.
because the stuff is tied together, the bottom line was Noriega had a whole bunch of secrets that went two ways. They knew he was a drug dealer. He knew that they were assisting and aiding in this whole drug trade stuff. There was some stuff about whether or not they were collusion in their assassination of Omar Torrijos, who was the leader of Panama before Noriega came into power. So all this stuff was sitting out there that former CIA head George H.W. Bush did not want coming out, so they snatched Noriega. So let's put it this way, folk. I mean, we don't need to beat this dead horse, literally speaking, any more than we have. Just those two instances alone. But the third one for me was not even well, tied to that was the racist war on drugs. You know,
Sure.
because Ronald Reagan did his war on drug and Bush ramped it up, and part of ramping up the war on drugs, of course, is to try to supposedly curtail the flow of drugs from those cartels in Central and South America. And guess what? They were in bed with them
Right.
anyway. So when what you call him wrote his piece, Dark Alliance, Webb, the reporter from the San Jose Mercury News.
Oh, yeah.
They basically tried to kibosh his stories, and they brought in the New York Times, who were always sometimes hand in glove with the CIA, the Washington Post, and the LA Times, and they tried to do a number on Webb's story. But fairness and accuracy in reporting, those guys did a dissection of the supposed dissection of Webb's, of the Dark Alliance, and said, no, those people were self-serving. The bottom line was, even one of the reporters that they use in the Ombudsman, Pete Carey, who I crossed paths with when I was doing the stuff on the transfer of that 2020 peace target for spies. The Russians trying to get our technology. I crossed paths with Pete Carey, and he was a sharp reporter, and he and I shared some information about all this transfer of spy stuff and what. He's the guy the San Jose Mercury News put on checking how that story had been done initially. He said, yeah, there were some flaws, there were some minor things that he can go back and correct. And he actually went back and added 3 more stories. But because of all the brouhaha and the big fight, I don't think the Mercury News ever published the 3 follow-up stories. And that was because the powers that be all colluded to try to put a kibosh on that story. So yeah, the war on drugs stuff that he was, the cover-up of the Iran-Contra, we could go on forever.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, and anyway, everybody's legacy has to be judged through the prism of how much did they do right by themselves, their colleagues, their family, and if you're a president, the country. And in the instance of Bush 41, I'm going to say some of the stuff he did for the country and the world was quite good, and a lot of the stuff he did that he thought was for the country was quite bad.
Yeah, if you listen to Bob Schieffer and Bill Plant over the last couple of days, they had a lot of good to say about George Herbert Walker Bush, but you know they covered a lot of, they were there a lot of times when they wished he would, just go away because of his mismanagement or lack of drive. Or, I mean, if you go back in their reporting, you'll see a lot of nits. But for this week, they give him a pass. But history will note that Bush was weak on a number of issues. His diplomacy was good. His racial equality and record was not that good. His accessibility to the minority community was not that good. So, there's a lot there you can complain about for sure. But he looks so much better when you compare him to his son.
Absolutely.
That's true.
And he's 1,000% better. You compare him to the guy that's in the White House right now.
Exactly.
Which is
that's
what
an easy comparison.
a number of commentators were saying just that. They said the reason why you're seeing this man lionize and made such a great halo
partially
put
in
over
contrast
him
to
is because of the
current,
major contrast to the current guy that's sitting in the White House right now.
Absolutely.
So that makes sense to me. So.
And could I just a little aside on the guy who's in the White House right now? I was at a book event for April Ryan, the CNN political analyst.
One of the 3 black women he's always assaulting and denigrating at White House press conferences.
Right.
Yes.
It's her, Yamiche Alcindor, and one other. I'm sorry, her name escapes me at the moment.
Yep.
But
I know who you mean. Yeah.
And he repeatedly told her to sit down at one particular press conference, and there was another film clip where he tells her with his finger shaking at her what a bad reporter she is. He made some nasty comment.
He does that. Yeah.
So there was a book event actually not far from where we're sitting right now, a couple blocks.
Last night.
2 nights ago.
2 nights ago.
Yeah,
I missed it. I wanted to go to that.
At the nearby Time Warner Center. And she was interviewed by Don Lemon, who, in my opinion, is not at her level of stature.
But he's getting better. He's
getting
growing,
better.
as we have noted over the years on Media Watch, as we've watched him.
He's improving, and he did well that night. I can't complain with how he handled that meeting, because it was both fun and informative. But at that meeting, April Ryan, she said that she thought she was getting PTSD from covering the Trump administration.
Actually, she probably was.
Yeah, I mean that's how
Because
bad it's gotten.
he's
really
always
got-
assaulting her.
Yeah.
That is something that White House Press Corps Association should take seriously and should start some serious pushback, because they do not need to let this man and Sarah Huckabee Sanders get away with half the stuff that they get away with.
Absolutely, but and that's the face of journalism today. I think half of these people are afraid of losing their White House credentials.
Yeah,
Which is something to be concerned about, of course, because it's your livelihood, it's your job. But it seems to me that 30 years ago, that wouldn't have mattered. Would Helen Thomas have sat there and, taken this?
If she saw someone else be treated the way April Ryan was, she would have shot up from her seat. She'd be fuming for weeks.
Absolutely.
And the rest of the room would be jumping up to back her up, and we're not getting that today.
I know, and I don't know.
You guys are looking for the glory days of Sam Donaldson, Dan
Yeah.
Rather,
Well,
Helen Thomas,
what happened
and a whole bunch of. I think even Tom Brokaw was a White House correspondent for NBC at one
Sure,
time.
sure.
Those guys did not, and part of it is they worked for people who gave them the backup
Yeah.
Who backed
to
them up
stand up.
right,
legally
yeah.
and
You
otherwise.
there, do your
That's
job.
true, yeah.
Because guess what? We're using the public airwaves to inform the public.
Right.
And guess what? Our job is to get the right goods from these people in power. So don't let them cow you. And rather Donaldson, I saw something on Facebook the other day when one of these White House executives says, "Where is Sam Donaldson when we need him?"
Yes.
I almost fell out the chair laughing. Because as one of Sam's former assignment editors, I understood exactly.
Sure.
We needed a guy like Sam Donaldson who would go toe-to-toe with those folks, just like Rather did and Brokaw and Ellen Thomas did.
And, not to mention some owners like Graham of the Post.
Martha Graham, yeah.
She put everything on the line to
When you had
print
ownership,
papers.
when you had ownership backing you like that, and that doesn't always happen. I mean, Bill Paley
because-
didn't always back up.
You see, here's the thing.
Yeah.
That's a tricky.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they get A plus and sometimes they get Fs because there are, for instance, that whole bit about those 3 papers demonizing Webb's story on the Dark Alliance on CIA tied with drug trafficking, dumping crack cocaine into the inner cities of California. Just because a number of these reporters and or owners, publishers, whatever, had long-standing ties with the CIA from the early days when they were founded. If the CIA is coming under fire, and it wasn't something that they did the investigation on, that they might have been able to control, they're going to say, well, okay, maybe that ain't that great a story, and maybe we don't need to be supporting that. And that was the case, which is what Fair was saying, and I think there's an assessment the Columbia Journalism Review also did on that story. That story blew up big. I'm surprised that, I think maybe that was like 96, no, 96. And none of the 3 networks, maybe a CBS, touched it. None of them touched it. Now, it blew up big in the black community because a lot of stuff that black people suspected, this reporter went in and said, look at what I just discovered. Then it turned out that Roger, was that other AP reporter I was telling you about, Parry, I believe that's his last name, and Neil Barger, let me see if I can call them up. Those guys had already written a similar story 10 years earlier, denoting that and talking about that happening. So yeah, sometimes they wear halos and the better angels come out.
Right.
Sometimes
They got feet of cloven, whatever. So yeah, we fall down sometimes. As much as we call it media watch.
I understand falling down, but purposely
sometimes
throwing
we're in
yourself
bed.
to the pavement.
Sometimes we're in bed with the bad guys.
It does happen.
Sometimes we're in bed with the bad guys.
So is that what's happening today? I mean, I don't understand.
See,
I just don't get it.
We have some outlets that pretend to be journalism, but they're just sort of but the public can't tell the difference
yes,
sometimes.
there's a mishmash right now.
Yeah,
folk. We try to say we talk, and we go to aggregates online as well as print stuff, and television, and we try to go to the people who actually have editors and assignment editors and executive editors and people who actually fact check and who try to make sure that what they're putting out is accurate or as close to accurate as good investigative journalism can come up with at the time. And then there's a lot of stuff online that just, you got stuff like InfoWars and 4chan and Fox faux news that are nothing but propaganda outlets that when we start to pull stuff down, we say, oh, that comes from the crazies out there.
Right.
But not everyone.
You have to know who the crazies are.
Thank you. That's why we're here. That's why we do this show.
Exactly.
So we can say, watch out for these folk. Watch out for and you got to watch out for some of the good guys sometimes because they can be in bed. And this is one of those shows where we're saying, in the instance of, because of the way the current White House is operating, the guy who just died looks like a saint.
Sure.
So,
they all look like saints compared to the guy who's there now.
I'm just saying, that's the way it is.
I saw a great meme after this guy's first year of George W. Bush, going like this. How do you like me now?
Yes.
We'll spend more time on this than I really wanted to.
I know. And we had 4 more points to go.
Yes.
No. We've done this. Our viewing audience get the idea.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The guy didn't walk on water. He did some good things.
Do the research.
He did some bad things. Hey,
it's all online.
Time will tell, but he's not a saint, folk.
And we have a minute and a
I don't
half.
think you can. I don't think you can be in politics and be a saint.
No.
That's another
that's true.
discussion.
Sure.
That's another
true.
discussion that we can have
That
some
is
other
true.
time. But I don't see how you can be a saint.
That is
and be
true.
a politician.
You got to be ready
It's a dirty
to,
business.
I was just about to say, you got to be ready to get your hands filthy
Absolutely.
sometimes.
Absolutely.
But you got to have a moral compass at the end of the day.
Hopefully. Yes. Absolutely.
George H.W. Bush did.
I think he did.
Trump did. Trump does not.
Trump doesn't have
That's
any
true.
kind of a compass.
That's true. That's true.
He has no bearings at all.
What, in the last 30 seconds that we have,
In about 45.
45 seconds, there are a number of stories that we're going to tell you keep an eye on. One, they're stealing votes, Republicans, in North Carolina, the particular election where they're not certifying results of one House seat because people were stealing ballots, okay? And they know it, so now they're doing an investigation. The Michigan and the Wisconsin legislatures are trying to pass laws to curtail the powers of the incoming attorney generals and governors of those states to thwart the will of the people who voted them out of office.
The incoming
20 seconds.
Democratic governors and so on.
Right.
So those are stories we meant to look into, but we got involved with other things.
We'll get there.
So those stories will still be going on when we come back again. This has been Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Raymond Peterson.
And see us on Twitter and at Media Watch EVT.
Catch you the next time.